The night shift at St. Augustine's Hospital hummed with the low, steady rhythm of machines. Monitors beeped faintly, ventilators hissed, and fluorescent lights buzzed above rows of half-lit patient rooms. The corridors smelled faintly of antiseptic and stale coffee, a place where time slowed but secrets pressed impatiently against the silence. Elena Navarro, head nurse, moved with practiced calm as she checked IV lines and scribbled notes on charts. To anyone passing by, she looked like the picture of efficiency, but her eyes flickered toward room 312, more often than protocol demanded. Behind its door, Victor Havel lay propped on pillows, an oxygen tube curled beneath his nose. His gaunt face was illuminated by the pale glow of the heart monitor beside him. When the corridor cleared, Elena slipped inside. The door clicked softly shut. "You shouldn't keep calling me in like this," she whispered, setting a tray down and checking his drip. Her tone was steady, but her hand trembled slightly on the IV line. Victor's lips curved faintly. "You're the only one I trust." His voice was gravelly, half swallowed by the oxygen. "They'll dig one day, Elena. If they ever find the body—" "Stop." Her whisper sharpened, slicing through the stillness. "Don't say that here." She glanced toward the security camera mounted in the corner, a tiny red light blinking. Her chest tightened. Crossing the room, she keyed into the monitor system at the nurse's desk, pulling up the feed. For a long moment she stared at the screen, herself leaning too close to Victor, his hand brushing hers. Panic flared across her face. With quick strokes, she accessed the archive and hit delete. The footage vanished. Her breath caught as footsteps approached from the hall. She closed the monitor, smoothed her uniform, and tried to regain her composure. The door opened. Another nurse, tired-eyed and holding a chart, stepped inside. She caught the last fragment of Victor's rasping voice. "If they ever find the body—" The young nurse froze, eyes widening as silence closed around them. The silence that followed was heavier than the sterile air in the room. The younger nurse, Hannah, blinked twice, masking her unease with a quick smile. "Patient check," she murmured, stepping toward Victor's chart, though her eyes lingered suspiciously on Elena. By morning, whispers had already taken root. In the break room, where the bitter smell of overbrewed coffee hung in the air, 2 orderlies muttered under their breath. "She's been covering his shifts too much," one said, stirring sugar aimlessly into his cup. "Why's Navarro always in his room? Doesn't make sense." Another snorted. "I've seen her pulling double nights just to keep him under her watch. It's off." Hannah, seated at the far table, pretended to scroll her phone but listened, closely. The words clung like nettles, fueling what she'd overheard. Every glance at Elena now seemed loaded. Every movement near Victor tinted with unspoken suspicion. In the ward, Elena forced her routine into perfection. She smiled at patients, updated charts meticulously, never once letting her eyes flicker toward Victor while others could see. But beneath her mask, her thoughts churned. She had felt the shift already, the weight of judgment hanging in corridors, the sudden quiet whenever she entered. Victor, sensing her tension, chuckled weakly that evening. "They're starting to talk, aren't they?" "Don't," she warned, voice tight, adjusting his drip. But his eyes glittered, savoring the game. Secrets make the air taste sweeter, but eventually, they suffocate. The words hung ominous as the heart monitor beeped steadily beside him. Then, without warning, Victor's chest heaved. His hand shot out, clutching Elena's wrist with startling strength. His lips moved, a single name escaping on a ragged whisper. "Elena!" The alarm blared. The alarm pierced through the ward, shrill and urgent. Nurses rushed in, a flurry of blue scrubs and gloved hands. Elena shouted vitals, slipping seamlessly into crisis mode, though her pulse raced faster than the heart monitor beside her. Within seconds, Victor stabilized, his breathing shallow but steady. Still, The damage was done. The spectacle had drawn attention. Later that morning, Hannah found herself in the administrator's office. Her voice was hushed but insistent. "Something's wrong with Navarro and that patient. I heard them talking about a body." Dr. Patel, the weary hospital director, rubbed his temples. With lawsuits already mounting against the facility. For negligence, he couldn't afford scandal. He made the call reluctantly, his voice low into the receiver. "Yes, send someone, quietly." By noon, 2 detectives from the city's major crimes unit stepped onto the ward. Detective Marlowe, broad-shouldered with eyes that scanned every detail, and his partner, Detective Ruiz, sharp and unflinching, took in the sterile chaos of hospital life with practiced detachment. They interviewed staff discreetly, their notebooks filling with fragments of suspicion. Elena sat across from them in a side office, her hands folded too neatly in her lap. "Head Nurse Navarro," Marlowe began, his tone calm but probing. "You've been spending a lot of time with patient Victor Havel." Her jaw tightened. "He's high risk? I've been monitoring him closely. That's my job." Ruiz leaned in. "Then why would one of your colleagues claim she heard the words, 'if they ever find the body,' coming from his room?" Elena's eyes flashed just briefly before she composed herself. "Patients hallucinate. He's delusional." Anyone overhearing that took it out of context. The detectives exchanged a glance. Marlowe scribbled something, then slid a folder onto the table. Inside was Victor's criminal record: fraud, identity theft, embezzlement, but a 10-year gap in his file stood out like a jagged tear. "Funny thing," Marlowe said evenly. "He vanished for almost 2 years. No trace, no records. Care to explain why a man like that keeps whispering your name?" Elena's silence was deafening. Detective Marlowe flipped through Victor's file again, tapping the 2-year gap with his pen. From 2011 to 2013, he just evaporates. No work history, no medical records, no taxes filed. Then he reappears with a new name, new papers, and a fraud conviction waiting. Elena shook her head quickly. "I don't know anything about his past. I treat patients, detective. That's all." But Ruiz's eyes narrowed. "You seem very protective of him for someone who just treats patients." Back in room 312, Victor wore a faint smile as if enjoying the theater of suspicion surrounding him. When the detectives entered, he greeted them with a mocking cough. "Gentlemen and lady," he rasped, eyes flicking toward Elena, who lingered anxiously in the doorway. "Digging into my past already? You won't find much, not unless you ask the right person." Marlowe crossed his arms. "Who's that supposed to be?" Victor's gaze slid toward Elena like a blade. "Ask her. She knows more than I do." Her breath hitched, but before she could respond, Victor reached under his pillow and withdrew a small folded slip of paper. His hand trembled as he held it out. "Since you're so curious, here's something to chew on." Ruiz unfolded it, cautiously. Inside was a rough, hand-drawn map. Lines and marks, shaky and imprecise, sketched an area on the outskirts of the city. Woodland trails, an X scrawled deep in the trees. Victor's lips curled upward. "That's where the past sleeps. But be careful, some graves aren't meant to be disturbed." Elena's pulse pounded in her ears. She wanted to snatch the paper back, burn it, erase it before it could say more than words ever could. Marlowe slipped the note into his pocket. His eyes cut toward her. "You sure you don't know anything about his past, Nurse Navarro?" Her silence said enough. The next morning, rain slicked the city streets as Marlowe and Ruiz followed the hand-drawn map out past the suburbs, into a stretch of woodland where the trees grew thick and close. The air was damp, heavy with the smell of moss and earth. Their boots crunched on wet leaves as they traced the shaky lines against the terrain. "This could be nothing," Ruiz muttered, scanning the forest with a flashlight even though daylight still filtered through. Marlowe crouched, studying the crude X Victor had drawn, It corresponded to a small clearing marked by a rotting fence post. "Men like Havel don't play games without a reason," he said. After an hour of careful searching, Ruiz's foot struck metal. Together they cleared away dirt and roots, revealing a rusted lockbox, its edges eaten by time. Gloves on, Marlowe pried it open. Inside lay scraps of fabric, a waterlogged notebook, and, most chilling of all, a nurse's badge, tarnished but still legible. The nameplate read, "Angela Mora." R.N. Ruiz's stomach dropped. "She's the one who disappeared. What, 10 years? Back? Worked at this very hospital." Marlowe nodded grimly. "And Navarro was her protégé." Meanwhile, back at St. Augustine's, Elena's fragile balance was fracturing. She returned home late to find her estranged husband waiting in the dimly lit kitchen. His voice was cold, sharp with suspicion. "Where have you been?" "You've been pulling money from accounts I didn't know existed. And now detectives are sniffing around you? What the hell have you done, Elena?" Her mask cracked just slightly. "I'm trying to protect us. That's all you need to know." He slammed his fist on the table. Protect us? Or protect him? The question hung poisonous. That evening, forensic results came back on the badge. Under the corroded surface, they found faint blood traces. DNA confirmed what Marlowe feared. Angela Mora's blood. The past had clawed its way into the present. The discovery of Angela Mora's badge sent ripples through the hospital like a contagion. Old staff who had worked with her whispered in corners, their voices hushed but tinged with fear. Angela had been respected, sharp-minded, the kind of nurse who stood firm against mistakes, even against Elena, back when she was still finding her footing. Marlowe and Ruiz tracked down retired employees. One, an orderly with trembling hands, remembered the night Angela vanished. She was furious, he recalled. Said Elena was crossing lines, spending too much time with a patient. They argued in the parking lot. That was the last time anyone saw her. Elena's denials grew desperate. Sitting in the interrogation room, her voice wavered between anger and pleading. "She was my mentor, my friend. I didn't hurt her. I don't know what happened that night." But Ruiz slid a photo across the table, the rusted badge sealed in an evidence bag. "Her blood says otherwise." Back in Victor's room, the man watched the storm unfold with unsettling calm. When Elena entered, face pale and eyes rimmed red, he greeted her with a smirk. "They're closing in," he murmured. "But don't worry, they'll never find everything." Her voice cracked. "Why are you doing this?" Victor chuckled, low and rasping. "Because you need me. And the dead, they can't argue." That same night, Marlowe reviewed hospital, security archives. Most files were routine, but one clip from 2 nights earlier jolted him. The enhanced footage showed Elena leaning over Victor's bed, syringe in hand, injecting something not listed in his medication chart. The screen froze, on her face, half-lit, determined, and afraid. Marlowe leaned back in his chair. "Navarro, what the hell are you hiding?" The footage was damning. By dawn, Elena Navarro was escorted out of the ward in handcuffs, her colleagues watching in stunned silence. The metallic click of restraints echoed down the sterile corridor, heavier than any alarm. In the interrogation room, Ruiz placed the still image of Elena with the syringe in front of her. "What were you giving him?" Her hand shook against the cold table. "It wasn't poison, it was protection." Marlowe's brow furrowed. "Protection from what?" Elena's voice trembled. "Another nurse. Someone's been trying to finish him off. I was giving him a stabilizer, something to keep him alive until I could figure out who." Ruiz scoffed. "That's a convenient story." Elena leaned forward, eyes wild. "You think I want to keep him alive? He's the reason Angela is gone. He's the reason I can't sleep at night." Her words cracked open something raw, too desperate to be rehearsed. Still, it wasn't enough to free her. At home, the consequences spilled into her family. Her teenage daughter, Sophia, sat stiffly across from detectives when they came knocking. Tears blurred her eyes as she admitted, "I heard Mom once, late at night on the phone. She said we had to keep the past buried." The confession twisted the knife deeper. Back at the hospital, Victor listened with quiet satisfaction as Marlowe confronted him again. His frail hand picked at the edge of his blanket, lips curling into a faint smirk. "She doesn't even know the whole truth," he whispered. Marlowe narrowed his eyes. "Then tell me." Victor's laugh was low and dry, a rasp that lingered. He leaned closer, his breath rattling. "I kept the photo," he said. Marlowe's pulse quickened. "What photo?" Victor's eyes glinted, savoring the reveal. "You'll see. It changes everything." The photograph was tucked beneath Victor's mattress, sealed in a yellowing plastic sleeve. Ruiz slid it free with gloved hands, holding it under the harsh interrogation light. The image, though faded, was unmistakable. 3 figures standing near a half-dug pit, at what looked like a construction site. On the left, Angela Mora, her arm, tense as if mid-argument. Beside her, a younger Elena Navarro, eyes wary, lips pressed tight. And between them, a man unknown, tall in work clothes, shovel in hand. His face caught the camera at just enough of an angle to show recognition if anyone still alive remembered him. Marlowe leaned over the photo. "Who's the man?" Victor coughed, feigning weakness before smiling. "A patient, or maybe a problem. You decide." Ruiz's voice sharpened. "Where was this taken?" Victor shrugged. "Hospital expansion, 10 years ago. Fresh concrete, new foundation. Convenient place to lose something, or someone." When Elena was shown the image hours later, her face drained of color. I don't know why he had that. We weren't digging graves. Angela said the patient wandered off. We were trying to help." Her voice faltered under the detective's stare. Marlowe tapped the edge of the photo. "If you were helping, why does it look like you're covering up a hole?" Elena shook her head furiously, but her denial rang hollow in the sterile room. By evening, a ground team was dispatched to the now-renovated wing of St. Augustine's. Heavy machinery rumbled as scanners probed beneath the hospital's polished floors. At 14 feet down, the radar spiked, an outline. Human. Ruiz swallowed hard. "We've got a body." Floodlights bathed the construction site in stark white as crews drilled into the foundation. The smell of pulverized cement hung heavy, mixing with the damp night air. Officers stood by, their radios crackling faintly as anticipation built. When the final slab lifted, silence fell. Beneath, wrapped in brittle plastic and soil-stained cloth, lay human remains curled in a shallow grave. Time had reduced the body to bone and fragments, but the truth was undeniable. The forensic team worked, methodically photographing, bagging, preserving. Hours later, DNA confirmed the identity. Jonathan Price, a patient who had vanished from St. Augustine's records in 2013. Officially, he'd walked out and never returned. Ruiz read the report aloud in the command tent. Male, mid-30s. Cause of death, blunt force trauma to the skull. Not an accident. Back at the precinct, Elena was confronted with the findings. She clutched the table's edge, her knuckles white. "Jonathan didn't die because of me. He and Angela." Her voice broke. "Angela and I were involved with him. It was complicated. He collapsed, hit his head." Angela panicked. "Victor convinced us the hospital would bury us if they knew. So we buried him instead." Her words tumbled out, half confession, half prayer. "I wanted to come clean. But Victor, he said he'd expose everything. He made me believe silence was the only way." Marlowe studied her with cold precision. "So which is it, Nurse Navarro? An accident? Or something darker?" She pressed trembling hands to her face. "It was an accident, but the cover-up wasn't. That was on me." Before the weight of her words could settle, Ruiz entered with fresh evidence. A plastic scrap from the body wrapping had yielded fingerprints, not 10 years old, fresh, and they matched Victor Havel. Marlowe's gaze darkened. He's been playing us. That body was never just buried. It's been staged. The revelation landed like a thunderclap. Victor's fingerprints, fresh on a decade-old corpse. It made no forensic sense unless he had tampered with the remains recently. Marlowe and Ruiz returned to his room. Victor reclined against his pillows, oxygen hissing softly, his expression that of a man already savoring his victory. "You've been busy," Marlowe said, dropping the lab report on his lap. "Care to explain why your prints are on a body supposedly buried 10 years ago?" Victor chuckled, low and rasping. "Insurance. You can't blackmail someone without keeping proof close at hand. I had to refresh the evidence, make sure it was still usable." His eyes flickered toward Elena, seated between two guards, pale and trembling. "She knows. She always knew." Elena shook her head violently. "He forced me. Every time I tried to walk away, he reminded me. Photos, papers, lies that would destroy my daughter." Victor's grin widened. "She stayed because she loved me once. Fear just sweetened the bond." Outside the interrogation glass, Elena's estranged husband confessed his own entanglement. He admitted to Marlowe in a broken voice, "Victor blackmailed me too, caught me in a fraud scheme years ago. Said if I didn't keep quiet about Elena, he'd ruin us both." Victor's web stretched wider than they'd realized, but just as Marlowe began drafting a warrant to secure him, chaos erupted. A fire alarm blared in the ward. Sprinklers hissed to life, water drumming against tiles. In the confusion, Victor slipped from his bed, IV line ripped free, gown clinging to his thin frame as he vanished into smoke-filled corridors. Minutes later, they found a note taped to the nurse's station in his spidery handwriting. "You're chasing the wrong ghost." The hospital corridors were chaos. Alarms shrieking, water pooling across the linoleum. Patients wheeled frantically to safety. Amid the confusion, Victor had melted into the industrial underbelly of St. Augustine's. Maintenance tunnels that stretched beneath the old wing, Marlowe and Ruiz led the pursuit, flashlights cutting through the damp concrete halls. Their radios buzzed with scattered updates, but Victor stayed one step ahead, his laughter echoing faintly in the darkness like a phantom. "Navarro was never your main suspect." His voice drifted through the tunnels, mocking. "She was just convenient. I made sure of that." They rounded a corner and found Elena, escorted under guard, drenched, shivering. She'd confessed more in the hours prior, her face hollow from exhaustion. "I thought if I stayed quiet, he'd protect me," she admitted hoarsely as Ruiz pressed her for details. "Angela, Jonathan, it was all him. He used my fear, my shame. I thought I was saving myself, but I was covering for a murderer." Her words fueled Marlowe as they pressed deeper. At last, Victor appeared at the end of a tunnel, cornered by a rusted gate. He looked spectral, soaked gown clinging to his frail frame, eyes burning with mania. "You think this ends here?" he rasped, raising a pistol stolen from a distracted guard. He pressed the barrel against his temple, teeth bared in a twisted grin. "The truth is buried deeper than any of you know." "Drop it, Victor," Marlowe barked, gun drawn steady. Victor's finger tightened on the trigger. The echo of his words hung like smoke. "Deeper than any of you know." He pulled. Click. A misfire. His stunned silence lasted only a breath before Ruiz surged forward, tackling him hard against the wet concrete. The gun clattered into the shadows. Victor writhed, laughter turning into a wheezing cough as restraints clicked shut around his wrists. But even in defeat, his eyes gleamed. "You've only peeled back one layer," he whispered. "There's more." Victor sat shackled in the interrogation chair, damp hair plastered to his forehead, his breathing uneven but his defiance intact. Marlowe and Ruiz faced him across the table, the hum of the overhead light casting stark shadows against the walls. "You've run out of games," Marlowe said. "Angela Mora, Jonathan Price, Elena Navarro. It ends here." Victor's grin returned, faint but sharp. "You think I killed Jonathan? You're wrong. That was a contract gone sour. A job for money, buried under your own hospital's concrete." Angela tried to cover it. "Navarro was too weak to walk away. I just made sure the pieces stayed hidden." Ruiz's voice cut like steel. "Murder for hire. Who paid you?" Victor chuckled, coughing blood into his sleeve. "That's the beauty. You'll never prove it. The man who wanted Jonathan gone is already dead. All you'll ever have is me." Across town, Elena Navarro stood before a courtroom weeks later, her daughter clutching her hand. She had confessed to obstruction, to lying, to burying the truth. The jury's eyes weighed heavy on her, but her voice was steady. "I betrayed my oath as a nurse. I betrayed my mentor. I betrayed my own daughter. All because I thought silence would protect me. Silence doesn't heal. It kills." Her sentence was years in prison, softened only by her cooperation. As guards led her away, Sophia's quiet sobs filled the room, breaking hearts more than any gavel's strike. Victor's fate was harsher. Multiple counts of murder for hire, fraud, and conspiracy stacked into a mountain no lawyer could topple. He sat smirking through the verdict, shackled to the very end. On a gray morning, Detective Marlowe walked the quiet halls of St. Augustine's. The ward lights flickered overhead, casting brief shadows across the polished floors. He paused outside. Room 312, Victor's old bed, now empty. His reflection wavered in the glass as he whispered, not to anyone, but to the ghosts the case had stirred. In chasing love, she uncovered rot. In chasing secrets, he buried himself alive. And we keep digging, knowing every shovel of dirt turns up something uglier than the last. The monitor in the room beeped, steady and indifferent. Life at the hospital went on, sterile and humming, as if nothing had ever been unearthed. But for those who had lived it, the scars were permanent.